I guess only the fact that the Mazda has won the last 3 12-hour races would we be termed as favourites, but I think that new Porsche really is a very, very, very good car, and also the BMW is a very good car. So, you know, the reason that Mazda are in motorsport is to prove their product, and you know, let's hope that it happens again. 4 in a row would be nice.
The Mazda's had a good package for a fair while, and Porsche have probably been a little bit behind them, but I feel now that Porsche have got a better package than what they've had, and we're hoping that it's going to be better than the Mazdas.
Welcome back to Eastern Creek, where
the 5th year of Australia's leading production car race, a speed and reliability test for cars in showroom condition, would be very different to the previous 4. Firstly, it was at a new track, the tight confines and constant turns of Eastern Creek, instead of the big open spaces of Bathurst's Mount Panorama. And the competition was tougher. Porsche, BMW, Maserati and Mazda all promised to renew their battle of the previous year, and all but one was doing it with faster cars. Only Maserati's potent biturbo would be the same, but even before testing started, that was withdrawn. That left 3 hot, fast contenders, an Australian development of BMW's already quick M3. The M3R had some performance mods that lifted the M3's price by 50% to more than $180,000. Despite announcing the M3R late last year as a contender specifically for the 12-hour, BMW not only failed to enter, it also discouraged private entries, demanding that any M3 entered not be referred to as an R version of it. From 4 contenders to 2 before entries closed, the speed of the Porsches and Mazdas must have been daunting. They were certainly serious. The main challenger from the last 2 years, Porsche, was sparing nothing. Its cheaper 968, itself more expensive than any RX7, was disposed of in favour of Porsche's gun sports model, the traditional rear-engine 911. And not only a 911, but a lighter, more powerful, faster version of it, the Club Sport.
This particular car is really one of 1,100 that were built worldwide, and the RSCS, which this is actually 100 of that 1,100, and it's just 50 kilo lighter than the basic Tourer version.
In a curious equation, more power and much less equipment cost much more money. Anybody wanting a 911 RSCS for the road, without even a roof lining or a radio, needed $218,000, although racers keen to use them were given a better deal.
The RX7's about 30% a race car, the BMW 50, and this is about 90 in the way it comes off the showroom floor.
It looked as if Mazda might have met its match. Porsches have raced and succeeded at the top of almost every branch of motorsport. Formula One Grand Prix, IndyCar, Can-Am sports cars in America, Le Mans and other 12 and 24-hour classics. Matching that proven performance wouldn't be easy, especially with a rotary engine with just 2 cylinders, rotating chambers measuring just 1,308 cc's and costing less than half its rival. Yet Mazda's concept with its locally developed and built SP model was not to compromise by taking out luxury items, but to improve all-round performance. Yet even with turbo assistance, nothing but the best drivers and race preparation would be good enough to match Porsche.
It's a total package. You've got to have the right drivers, you've got to have the right car, and then really importantly is the right team. The mechanics, the pit crew, everybody in the team has got to be absolutely spot on.
As the only Japanese manufacturer to win at Le Mans, team manager Alan Horsley was sure of 2 things: that the engine would be fast enough and that it would be reliable. And that was vital for a realistic tilt at winning.
It's incredibly important. It puts us in the forefront of technology in motor racing. We're beating marks like BMW and Porsche and Lotus. It's very, very important to us.
With the regulations allowing greater modifications and smaller production runs of competing cars in '95, both Mazda and Porsche knew the race would be faster and harder this year.
You race and you could go out and go flat out all the time and use up the car much more. It's quite a, from a driver's point of view, it's a very interesting race because you have to think about it all the time.
If your petrol lasts for an hour and a half, you drive the car as hard as you can for an hour and a half, you change drivers and he does the same. So although the 12 hours is a long race, it's virtually made up of a whole lot of sprint races.
So to qualifying, where Porsche went well, taking the top 3 grid positions with Mazda 4th, 5th and 6th. It was just 1 second over the Porsches and the fastest Mazda, with the others 2 seconds slower. A big setback though for Mazda came in the last few minutes of Saturday's practice. Because its regular driver, 2 times race winner Gary Walden was sick and not getting better, reserve driver Alan Grice was sent out to get on the pace. Instead, Grice crashed the car they were to share with Mark Scaife. The fastest Mazda was all but destroyed, and the race just 14 hours away. Combined with Mazda's own team of already tired mechanics, the TAFE crash repair team headed to Mazda's Sydney base to start repairing and rebuilding. The car couldn't be as good as originally, but perhaps it would be good enough to help win what was sure to be a tough race. This was effectively a race only between Mazda and Porsche. One of their 6 entries would win, providing it survived the gruelling enduro. 3 seconds covered their 6 cars, but there was more than that. 3.6 seconds from the last of the 6 to the next contender, the all-aluminium Honda NSX supercar with Sir Jack Brabham and Targa Tasmania winner Greg Crick aboard. Not long now to the 6 a.m. start, the moment when talk and rumour changes to prove it or shut up, and the repaired black Mazda still having the final touches done. In the race plan, Mazda was hoping for no brake pad changes. The John Smith, Jeff Morgan, Brad Jones Porsche perhaps won. But for the Peter Fitzgerald, Jim Richards Porsche using different pads, as many as 3 changes. It would have to race fast to make up that time. And that's the front row of the grid. The man who's been on pole position once before, car number 3, Peter Fitzgerald. He won the race in 91, its inaugural year. Has led it every year, but he only managed to win it in 91 and to take pole position that same year. But never won for Porsche, nor indeed has Porsche ever won the race. Can they change it today? Back through the field and people already getting anxious, trying to jump the start the little PRB club, and as they get underway for 12 hours of action, and already a car scored on the grid, and that was the leading Class B Mazda 626 of Kusparis, car number 36. Took pole position in its class, or was the fastest qualifier in its class, but already Peter Fitzgerald looking comfortable in car 3. Mazda and Porsche started testing in rounds of the GT Production Championship, as well as sprint races at the IndyCar Grand Prix meeting last March. But it was after mid-year before the Australian-developed SP version of the RX7 was ready to race. The first time the 2 protagonists came together at Eastern Creek, they'd each tested there before on their own. Porsche was fastest. They boasted of John Smith's 1 minute 41.9 second lap, and that Mazda had not betted 1:44. But Porsche should have known better than to assume that Mazda race team boss Alan Horsley was doing much more than giving the impression he wanted them to have. Winning a race is more than just ripping around flat out.
And Peter Fitzgerald leads, and that's going to be the first lap in many for him.
Over John Smith in car number 4. The second of the Porsches that's owned by Jeff Morgan, but John Smith's at the wheel. Andrew Miedike's at the wheel of the other Porsche, and number 11 is in 3rd place at this stage. John Bowes, the best of the Mazdas, followed by Mark Scaife in the rebuilt one, the black Mazda, number 9. Terry Bosanjak then in the next Mazda is car number 8. And already the light improving. It's really starting to lift here, just 5 odd minutes of the race run. The race leader, Peter Fitzgerald. The repaired black RX7 was meant to be the hare for Porsche to chase. Because of its rushed repairs, its anti-lock brakes were not working. But it didn't matter too much, for the Porsches were setting a frantic pace for each other, punishing their brakes and tyres. And tyres were the Porsche's main problem. Andrew Miedike had already survived a wild spin off the end of the straight. In that car had 1 tyre failure at 220 through the corner off the end of the straight. Went off, damaged that rim, but also the other rim that was on the outside of the car too, as we see a Mazda wanting to get by a Porsche down the inside now, and he's got him. There's no way, I don't think there's any way that Miedike can grab it back. So pretty smoothly and surgically cleanly,
He's come by, and you can see him already stepping away pretty smartly from the 3.8 litre Porsche. I talked of the Citroën arriving in the pits at a bit of a pace earlier, and let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at it out in the grass. I'd say fresh out of brakes myself. Whoa. And well, look at this, very nearly a rollover. I'd say totally out of picks, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the
wipers are going now. The bonnet's
huge
up.
Problem there is started out in the grass, which is the mystifying bit.
A lot of smart people have said, I'm not going to stand in front and say stop here, because it doesn't look as though it's ready to stop. John Bow looking for a way round John Smith.
Well, Smithy's taken a defensive line into the first turn, and now he's going to have to protect down at turn 2 here in the hairpin, but John Bow is already through. So Mazda to second. Bow is charging. On his last lap, he was significantly quicker than both the Porsches. This is 4th place, Andrew Madecki, and here's a challenge. Is he down the inside? Oh, this is marginal.
A little bit of pressure. John Bow loves it, doesn't he?
Oh, he's a tiger.
He is a tiger and a racer. A bit of cheek, upset them. Just about got here. That's an interesting one there.
Yeah, he's
stay in tight and get out well.
Whether you'll get away with it. Bitsy's not prepared to argue, so that's probably pretty wise at this stage of the day.
Leads the race to Corporate Hill.
Smith might sneak underneath Peter Fitzgerald here. No, but had a very good look. So John Bow leads the race. That's interesting.
Coming up towards 30 minutes. Porsche is led, Mazda is led. And the battle certainly is on in earnest and very evenly between these two rivals that are renewing their fight for the 3rd year. So a pretty...
Can't afford to do that, John.
No, you can't, can you?
That was into the back of the John Burke WRX, and I think that's going to allow John Smith to have another nibble. That's the sort of thing that you've just got to be so careful of. Bow now through, and it was only a glance. It'll just be a crease in the paint, but they're the sorts of things that can bring you undone in this type of racing, and we're still only 27 minutes into a 12-hour race. This is the Gary Walden Mark Scape car number 9 in 6th place, and some way back from the leaders, but using plenty of road. And so, I mean, looking at the car, it suggests that he's driving it very hard, so maybe it just doesn't have the pace for whatever reason.
And in car number 4, I think John Smith wants the race lead.
This was but a minor motor racing drama for the Toyota Corolla and its 32-year-old driver, Glenn Mason. A few weeks later, he became famous nationwide through photos and footage of his spectacular crash at Bathurst.
Dear oh me.
At least 8 rollovers and destruction of his Suzuki GTI at 180 kilometres an hour made this wheel loss seem well planned. And all rather tame.
But he's going to take it back round by the look of it. That last shot we saw before, he's limping back round on the grass. Here he is,
yes,
doing a bit of ploughing along the way. It's interesting to note that Peter Fitzgerald's slip through the field continues. He's down in 6th place now, and Gary Walden's come up to 5th as we're looking at John Bow in Mazda number 7, and he's still got a very marginal lead over John Smith.
And yes,
he's
pit lane bound. I wondered if it was. It seemed to be holding tight out of there. Now, so an hour and 6 minutes for the Porsche stop. As I was saying earlier, at a test day here a few weeks ago, good quick stop.
This is the Bosnjak Mazda, by the way, car number 8. It's up into 3rd place now. Good strong entry with Alan Jones in there as well. And this is the Andrew Madecki Synovus Porsche. They're not making their hour and a half.
No, certainly not.
There's Scafie on standby.
And into the pits comes car number 9. That's Gary Walden from 3rd place as he worked his way up with other Porsche pit stops.
This pattern of different pit stops and race pace between Porsche and Mazda promised a constant seesawing battle. The Porsches were quick while their tyres were fresh, but then their times fell away. The Mazdas were more consistent and stayed out longer. By the time the first Mazda pitted on lap 47, all the Porsches had already been in. The first, Smith Morgan Jones, was on lap 38. The next, Fitzgerald Richards on lap 43, followed by Madecki and Noski on lap 44.
Jack's out and away.
The number 7 Mazda, driven in its first stint by John Bow, led from lap 15, but after the stops, Brad Jones took Porsche number 4 to the lead. When he pitted on lap 73, Richards fought back past Dick Johnson to give Porsche the lead until it stopped on lap 82. Johnson then resumed the lead until his stop 11 laps later on lap 93. After this round of stops, Porsche was running 1-2 with the Bow-Johnson Mazda chasing in third.
So a fascinating situation. As I say, it looked as though Porsche was starting to gallop away with the race. They were brought back to heel with the unevenness of the pit stops. If, for instance, we look at car 4, the one we're following now and in the race lead, it's had 66 minutes in its first stint and 61 only in the second stint. Now compare that with two of the Mazdas. Car number 9, the one that Gary Walden's sharing with Mark Scaife, 78 minutes its first stint and 79 minutes the next, a significantly longer run than out of the lead Porsche car number 4. Car number 7 has done 81 minutes in both its stints. The Mazdas are going longer on stints and are still keeping this race very much alive. Down in the pits is John Smales.
John Smith, one of the co-drivers of the now leading Porsche 4, you're not getting enough time on the track between fuel stops.
Yes, we're just using too much fuel. It's not gone according to our calculations. We're getting just over the hour on fuel, and we thought we'd get about an hour 15.
So what does that mean, John? By the end of the day, one more fuel stop?
Maybe, John. That's the biggest worry. I wouldn't mind a pace car being out there occasionally now.
Well, with that oil that was dropped, you must have had a heart attack when you saw Morgan have his lose.
Yeah, but actually he's recovered and his lap times are sort of back down to what they should be, so we're happy with that. But oil's oil, you can't do anything about it.
This was the car that created the problems. Blew its engine and had a slight oil fire underneath the bonnet and created chaos, firstly for Morgan in car number 4. And he was the race leader, still is, but cut away the lead, and then Peter Fitzgerald on the oil spilt from that Corolla, car number 38, that was actually running at 27th place. When it blew its engine, it was nowhere.
Car 4 in the pits, John Smith came in.
But on lap 108, Porsche was struck a body blow. Soon after its spin, the lead car of John Smith, Morgan, Jones had gearbox trouble and was out.
John, what's gone wrong?
Yeah, it's broken the gearbox, I'd say, John, just an actual guess. Looks like it anyway. There's gear lever's like a wand at the moment. It's stuck in gear and not much connecting the front to the back.
You changed up through the first 3 all right?
Yeah, went up through the gears. I just got over the back into the tight S's and around the back to third gear, and that's all she wrote. After that, said nothing.
Huge disappointment this early in the race.
Yeah, could say that.
What causes the thing to do that?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's very disappointing, John. That's all I know.
And 20 laps earlier, the Terry Boz and Jack Allen Jones Mazda, which had led for 1 lap during the first frenzy of pit stops, was sidelined by an electrical problem. So it was now 2 Porsches against 2 Mazdas, with the Bow-Johnson Mazda battling Fitzgerald Richards in Porsche number 3 for the lead. The latter took over the lead from Morgan's now retired Porsche, but Bow chased and retook the lead 13 laps later.
And this is the moment when the lead changed yet again between Porsche and Mazda. Peter Fitzgerald back in the car and in the lead, and look at the Mazda on the tight inside line and just shoots through.
Bow apparently came from so far behind at the beginning of the straight, he apparently caught Peter Fitzgerald napping, seemingly unaware of the threat until it was too late. But just 5 laps later, Fitzgerald made his 3rd pit stop on lap 126.
Yet for a pit stop to occur on car number 7.
The Bow-Johnson Mazda not only sailed 13 laps past that to its pit stop, crucially, it held its lead after the stop.
When the driver change occurred between John Bow and Dick Johnson taking over, Dick came back out in front of this car, number 3, the Falcon Porsche, with a 7.2 second lead. So that's quite impressive, and I think that's going to be a factor that we have to bear in mind throughout the day.
And Will, you mentioned a little while ago about Alan Horsley's cool fuel. Well, here's Alan Horsley, and here's the fuel. Now, Alan, what's it cool to? What temperature?
We take it down from about 24 degrees when we put it into the tank, and it drops down to 7, 8 or 9 degrees.
The conventional wisdom is that you do that to fit more fuel into your fuel tank. Is that correct?
Yeah, while we get a little bit more fuel into the tank, the big improvement is in the engine. It keeps the engine very cold and very workable.
Can you actually prove that? I mean, with your telemetry, do you know that that's happening?
Yes, we do know it.
And what sort of performance boost does that give to the motor car?
Well, you can't put it in percentages or anything. It depends on the day, and as you know, today is very, very hot here, and it's working beautifully.
Is this the first time you've used it?
No, we've been experimenting with it all year, particularly at Surfers Paradise at the IndyCar Grand Prix.
There's a guy who thinks harder about how to win a motor race further before the start of the meeting than almost anybody.
The staggering thing is,
However, the talented and off-crowned Jim Richards was now back at the wheel of Porsche number 3. Sparking to the chase, he regained the lead on lap 148, holding it to his stop on lap 166. It then dropped to second place behind the Mazda, putting it in the lead. It was to hold to the end of the race.
Car to start. 59 seconds with the pads changed only on the front, but that is absolutely sensational.
Race leader now by 1 minute and 14 seconds over car number 3, the Peter Fitzgerald car, that's just done its pit stop and brake pad change.
Yet much could still happen. The Johnson-Bauer Mazda was due in around lap 184, but not long before this, the Suzuki Baleno of Lamore Hunter Skyfleet lost a wheel, stopping dangerously near the track edge on the exit to turn 6.
Suzuki Baleno.
Race officials decided to remove it with the use of the safety or pace car. As it proceeded down pit lane but had not yet come onto the track, race leader Johnson passed it correctly, still racing. Apparently keener to be in the pits than on the track, Peter Fitzgerald pitted before coming under pace car instruction, although he was only halfway into what should have been a 70-minute stint. Worse was that he only refuelled. Tyres, the Porsche's main weakness, were not changed. The next lap, and under pace car instruction, Johnson came in for a full regular stop. Fuel, tyres and driver change. Luckily for Mazda, this was right at the end of what was, to then, Mazda number 7's longest stint, 85 minutes on the track. Crucially, it had now saved 1 stop, 4 to the 5 stops for Porsche's 3 and 11.
What does it all mean, Alan?
I think Fitz may have pulled a little bit of an error in coming in for fuel only, because they've been chasing tyres all day. They haven't had a tyre problem, but their tyres have been marginal. Now he's putting extra laps on the same set of tyres. Mightn't be a terribly good move.
When the pace car came out, Johnson had a lead of 1 minute 31 seconds, 9/10 of a lap in front. Under pace car control, it was now a few cars behind the Fitzgerald Porsche, still most of a lap in front. On the first full flying lap after the pace car period, when all cars were up to racing speed, the Mazda led by 1 minute 43 seconds. Bowes sped off in pursuit of a now flustered Fitzgerald.
The situation, car 7, 1 minute 43.2.
Passed him and went on to a lap lead.
There it is.
this is important because if he can squeeze in front of him and then something else occurs in this race where the pace car does come out for whatever reason, there's the possibility of it working.
Look at him, coming from behind and sailing it right up, getting up a lot of corner speed, tucking in behind it. He's got him now. Fitzgerald wouldn't be able to defend that.
He's got very good mid-corner speed in the Mazda, and which means he's got good exit speed, and that's the result. Change of order.
Fitzgerald wants to come back at him, but there's no show. He hasn't got a chance.
At one stage, Mazda was nearly 2 laps ahead, but another pace car period on lap 240 accounted for part of that. At that stage, the Mazda being driven by Johnson led by 1 minute 49. Although the Fitzgerald Porsche had pitted only 8 laps earlier, it stopped again, but this time to take on fuel and tyres. The Mazda, which had stopped 6 minutes after the Porsche, stayed out.
A small part in a very lovely gearbox.
Oh, that's a bit different. That's a little bit adventurous, John Smith, eh?
Yeah, I don't know whether the Volvo driver actually saw the RX7 coming through them, but you have to keep the pace up, and it is very difficult when you're lapping cars like this in a car like the RX7 to keep your lap times up and the speed up.
Just in front of the Volvo is the Andrew Miedeke, Mark Noske Porsche, and perhaps if we can pick up on that, you might like to talk about the track. And wow!
Well,
we just got onto that. Just got onto that at the right time.
He's just dropped a wheel right off the edge.
Yeah.
He's going very slow. I think he's got a flat.
And he was just in front of Wyn Percy in the Volvo. Did everything right. The apex was there.
Yeah, he's just, at the tyres, you see, just blown then.
Suddenly, look, he's sideways. The rear's gone to blazes, and he was on opposite lock.
couple of weeks back when we tested here, I absolutely shredded a set of tyres in 3 laps, so I can understand what he's going through here.
Gary Walden in car number 9 is
29 seconds.
29 seconds in arrears to it. So in other words, it'll become Mazda 1-3, Porsche 2-4, and one of those Porsches in the pits. Out on the track, a little while later, the Porsches unlapped themselves. Well, this Porsche did. This is where at one stage John Bowe sliced down inside Peter Fitzgerald. On this occasion, it was a very well-judged overtaking manoeuvre, good corner speed, that saw Peter Fitzgerald come back and take what had been a lap and minute 40 deficit to back out to less than a lap. It's now a minute 38. So car number 7 here, being driven currently by Nick Johnson, has completed 270 laps. We're within half a minute of the end of 8 hours of this production
That
race.
second pace car period gave the Fitzgerald-Richards Porsche a nice advantage. A pit stop and the Bowe-Johnson Mazda lead reduced by nearly 40 seconds to 1 minute 10. This was a tough race. Mazda leading by 70 seconds despite doing 2 less pit stops, 5 to Porsche's 7.
In now with a lead of 1 lap and 8.6 seconds. So we'll come down initially to Peter Fitzgerald, Jim Richards. Peter Fitzgerald at the wheel of car number 3. Say a good sharp pit stop. Not quite as sharp as they would have liked, but not a bad one. So car 7 out again. Still in the race lead, but as I say, with less than a lap margin now. Down in the pits is John Smales with an important guest.
And indeed, the important guest is the man who just turned on a sensational battle against Peter Fitzgerald, Dick Johnson. Dick, that was a great race.
Yeah, it was a bit of fun out there. You know, the weather's sort of getting a little bit cooler, so it's really helping the car. So the times are coming down a bit. We've had a very trouble-free run so far. I just hope it keeps going to the finish. The tyres have been magnificent. The brakes are fantastic. It's just a gem to drive.
Car number 3, the Peter Fitzgerald, Jim Richards Porsche, going to the pits. Wants it attended to, so let's watch this one. 49.8. We were contemplating the possibility of Mazda coming in to respond to the problems or the dissatisfaction in the Porsche team. But here's Porsche disadvantaged. They're best placed of the 2 remaining cars.
Interesting if they see if they go for brake rotors. They've been changing.
And of course, this is the scheduled final stop.
That's
too.
right, yes. Interesting to see if they go for brake rotors. Remarkably, the Mazdas have not even put pads in their cars today, Will. The past 12-hour races have been all about brakes as far as pit stops are concerned. Brake rotors, brake pads. Mazdas have not changed them at all. Same compound tyre Peter Fitzgerald is going out on now. And that is a marvellous drive again by Jim Richards. He's been playing sort of catch-up all day, hasn't he?
Well, this really is a remarkable effort as we focus in again on the white Triple M Mazda car number 7 that's leading the race. To win any long-distance race is extremely difficult. To win 4 on the trot is against all odds, Neil Crompton.
Remarkable performance, and if Alan and his large team down there at Mazda can pull it off for the 4th time, it really is incredible. To be honest with you, very early in the morning I didn't think it was going to be possible, and I felt that it was going to be a day where the Porsche would really show its strength, but that hasn't been the case. They've used more of the tyres than we would have expected, and this little surprise with the brakes from the Mazda team.
So all was going well with the Mazda pit work and car number 7, but not with its driver.
But the question is, can anyone stabilise John Bowe? Because Alan Horsley, Bowe is starting to cramp up inside the car. What's the problem?
Yeah, we're quite concerned at the moment. He's got cramps in both his legs and arms. I think it was from just the hot weather earlier in the day, and we've got Dick on the radio trying to talk him out of it at the moment. So,
I mean, would you take the risk of bringing the car in and putting Dick back in?
well, if that it gets to that stage, yeah, we certainly will. But Dick's talking to him and trying to talk him out of this stuff, so I hope that works. But he is getting some pains in the arms, hands, legs, everywhere.
Is it just half an hour to go, nerves?
No, I don't think so. He actually had it the last stint as well.
Well, best of luck for the next 30 minutes.
Thank you.
He's still honking along, still doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look at the times he's doing.
Yeah, and 42.9 on the last lap, so Yeah, he's more of a pain to everybody else than he is to himself at the moment.
I think he would be if you had aspirations to winning the race. My pick of the drivers have been Jim Richards and John Bowe in the way they've gone in this race.
Yep, Jimmy did a great job, very quick, and Bowie, as always, has done a great job. It's a shame that car number 9 hasn't been able to put its best foot forward, because I think Gary Walden and Mark Scaife would have done a great job too.
Sure. With this the situation...
Although Mazda had a useful buffer, there wasn't much safety in it. Johnson and Bowe were racing car 7 as fast as they dared. In a distinguished career, and recently one littered with glittering success, John Bowe said it was the hardest race he's ever done.
So
the pit crew, as usual enthusiastic Mazda apprentices from dealers all around the country, were under enormous pressure not to make a mistake. One minor slip could change winning to losing.
A little bit strange. I wondered whether or not
wheel changing and refuelling practice for weeks before the race ensured that everything went smoothly. The lack of a brake pad change, cooled fuel to maximise performance and tank capacity made Mazda winners of a tough, hard 12 hours of racing by 80 seconds.
Second quicker, and it looks like that gap is going to stabilise around 1 minute 19, 1 minute 20 seconds. Past the start-finish line for another lap, and just a smidgen over 1 minute to run.
Look at Alan Horsley. It has been a sensational effort by him, not just today, but in planning this model.
Enormous group of people that Alan assembles from Mazda dealerships all around Australia, and he's got a large support staff at the race meeting, and this is a celebration to be shared by all. There's a lot of people go into a victory like this. An awful lot of people contribute in varying ways.
Absolutely.
And,
essential ways too, all part of a very large jigsaw. As John
Mazda's lithe, sporty RX7, a budget-priced sports car by comparison with the impressively priced Porsches, had done it again, beaten Germany's best. And this time it was Porsche's revered 911. Each had done their best, but Mazda had triumphed again. Not surprisingly, the Mazda camp was ecstatic.
And victory is his, and for the fourth time Mazda. In the 12-hour production race, the first time at Eastern Creek, doing more than 1,600 kilometres, and a jubilant Mazda team, chief executive from Mazda, Malcolm Goff, hugging Alan Horsley, and now euphoria takes over from what has been an enormously hard effort. And Jill Johnson there, car number 3, heading to second place, and doing an absolutely stunning job too. And one has to say, good on you, Porsche. A whole pile of guts for having a go. Other manufacturers have stayed away, and there's been a fair number of them, including BMW, but they put on the fight and they made it a very hard-fought race indeed, and the glory that much greater for Mazda and for Dick Johnson and for John Bowe. And third across the line will be the Andrew Miedeke car being driven by Mark Noske, so it's Porsche 2-3.
Oh, it's just the most wonderful car in the world. We've just beat what they call the best sports car in the world. I just think it's wonderful. It's just fantastic.
To win the race is fantastic, but to work all night, have the car that they've slaved over, make 12 hours, great effort.
And nearly third, but not quite.
Very, very close.
Will you be game to come back again? The odds are getting surely longer.
Well, every time you come here, quite obviously, you get closer to a loss. So I'll have to discuss this with Mr. Horsley.
It feels every bit as good as winning Sandown was last year.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Alan Horsley seriously is an amazing guy, and the fact that he puts all this together, this is very difficult to coordinate. A lot of the people on the team are apprentices. He moulds them into a team for a once a year event, and I think that's pretty special.
Mazda's first win at Bathurst's notorious and famous Mount Panorama racetrack in 1992 was hard-earned and joyous, but repeating the win was to be a much tougher task. It wasn't just Toyota's tough, heavy old Supra, a brace of V8 Holden Commodores, a fabulously expensive BMW M5 and some hot little turbo four-wheel drives that had to be beaten for glory this time. To win in 1993, Mazda was confronted by some of the most experienced and respected names in world motorsport. Among them, Lotus and Porsche. On top of those factory-backed teams was another, Nissan, with its state-of-the-art touring car, the twin-turbo, four-wheel drive, four-wheel steered Skyline GTR. Hot on the heels of its withdrawal from the multi-million-dollar whirl of Formula One Grand Prix racing was Honda, with its top-of-the-range, its European supercar challenger, the aluminium-bodied NSX. And enlisted to do justice to this mid-engined exotic car was no less than world motorcycle racing champion Wayne Gardner. Making competition even tougher, the Porsches were allowed controversial club racing modifications that improved their brakes, wheels and tyres. The 968 Club Sport was lighter and lower, so handling and fuel consumption were ideally suited to the long, tough grind that is the James Hardy 12-hour. These were all more expensive than Mazda's sports car, the RX7. Indeed, its five illustrious rivals were worth close to $750,000. By comparison, the two little RX7s cost less than $80,000 each. Mazda has an equivalent to the CS Porsche, a lighter, faster RX7 in Japan, but Mazda wanted to prove its road car, not a more specialised variant. So the Mazda drivers had the dubious race benefit of air conditioning, electric windows, central locking and alarm, an airbag, a sensational Bose sound system with CD, cruise control and even leather seats. Lovely everywhere, but at Mount Panorama racetrack. What the drivers did welcome, though, from the unalterable standard specification were anti-lock brakes and alloy wheels. In time, this race is nearly twice as long as the October classic, the Tooheys 1000. In distance, the 12-hour goes more than half as far again. And to make it even tougher, it starts in darkness, giving an enormous range of temperature and driving conditions. On top of that, these production cars are usually reliable, so a win would come only from racing faster than your rivals, not by inheriting a win from someone else's misfortune. As it turned out, this was one of the closest, hardest fought endurance races ever seen. For all but a few minutes of the tense 12 hours, the four fastest contenders, the Porsche 968 CSs and the Mazda RX7s, were neck and neck on the same lap and swapping places in a way that made resting drivers more anxious than those out on the track racing. Mazda's weapon was not only its unchanged, hard-charging sports car. Both RX7s had already done last year's race. This indeed was a real test of an extended warranty. Only the paint was different, due to BP recognising the professionalism and winning potential of the Mazda team. BP's moral support was welcome, but its technical support absolutely invaluable. Team manager Alan Horsley knew the faster pace this year would put greater strain on almost every component. They needed the best possible protection. This year, the drivers could not be kind to their cars. They would be driven harder than the team knew for sure that they could stand. It was a high-speed trip into the unknown, to fame or to failure. The Mazda team's professionalism came from an unlikely mix of people. Running it was the tough, craggy Alan Horsley, a veteran race team and circuit manager. But his helpers, the pit crews whose efficiency would be crucial to success, were Mazda apprentices who work in Mazda dealerships on normal Mazda road cars for customers. These apprentices were more used to servicing a 121 fun top for its proud owner than fettling a race car for a frantic driver. So when all the testing and qualifying was over, the BP Mazda Motorsport team was happy. The mid-engine $200,000 Lotus, of which none had been sold in the 6 months around the race, had taken pole position. But that was by less than 0.3 of a second in more than 2.5 minutes, so there was little in it. The Mazdas were second and third fastest, ahead of a Honda that had been crashed and badly damaged, trying to match the Mazda times, the two Porsches, the Nissan GTR and the winning Toyota Supra from 2 years ago. The team was happy and well prepared, yet not overconfident. Horsley knew the contest was too close and too tough for that. But his cars had run fast without problems. They were ready and in good shape for what became an epic battle. Amazingly, these cars from last year had shown they could be driven much harder, do seconds faster lap times, apparently without strain. All that remained was the horror of the middle of the night preparation for the 4:45 a.m. start.
Well, I don't think I'd even get up this early to go on holidays, to be honest with you.
What's the atmosphere like here in
Oh, it's great. I think it's all part of it. I mean, seeing the disc glowing bright red and being up this, I think it's great.
Followed by 12 hours, more than 1,600 kilometres of racing at the car's limits of endurance. Horsley knew and told his drivers they had to sprint. They could not spare the machinery. If it couldn't meet their demands, there would be very public failure. The test was on.
And a great start for the two Mazdas, a slow start for the Lotus. But from the row one into the lead goes Charlie O'Brien, supported well by Gary Walden from the second row. Larry Perkins took a little while to get the Lotus going. Should get going as he storms up the hill. Troubles too early on, and from pit lane for car number 39, the Falcon that was damaged, Christopher Sexton. And now the amazing sight on Mountain Straight. That's the sight that drivers see as they wend their way up the mountain. And welcome to John Bowe.
Well, it's a tremendous race. I think it's shaping up to be something really exciting, and I wish I was out there. It's unusual for me to not be involved in a race. I usually don't go unless I can drive.
Tell us about trying to do this job under these conditions.
Well, I'm not a great driver in the night, so I'm glad I'm not out there right at this minute, but it's very difficult because you get a lot of glare from all the lights. And
seeing plenty of that.
Yes, it's quite difficult to pick apexes and corners and things, so I think all the guys will be showing a certain amount of caution. But, you know, it's a long race and anything can happen.
I think it will too, most of it. Most of anything.
Well, certainly last year there was plenty of action, and I think the guys at the moment will just be stroking along and just seeing what happens.
Into Caltech
move there, so.
Into Caltech's chase, nearly 6 kilometres completed of the 6.213 kilometres, 254 laps covered last year, 12 more than in the previous year, 21 laps an hour average, and the Honda NSX is motoring along pit lane, going out to join the race there, just about 1 lap behind. A miraculous effort by the TAFE team to repair that car, because the car was so resistant to their wanting to straighten it out. The night traffic continues, thick and dark and difficult to identify, and then sideways off Skyline. I'm not sure whether it's a Falcon or a Commodore, but it's one of Australia's family cars, and in a pile of bother because crunch. So car 42, that is, that's Darrell Dixon's, Graham Lusty's Falcon S-Pack, and just restarting it there. A tremendous battle going on between the initial race leader, Greg Hansford, in the Mazda number 1, and now Peter Fitzgerald challenging him and hitting the lead on occasions in car number 5. Fitzgerald getting pretty cagey, I suspect, John Bowe, in trying to put the pressure on, while Greg Hansford tries to be very sympathetic with the Mazda.
That's right. Well, it's actually John Smith, I think, in the car, but they are looking very good. They've got a good package there, and I think they'll be looking good at the end of the day.
Just 1 hour and 20 seconds into the James Hardy 12 hour. The leading Mazda, car number 1 that was leading the race, has made its first pit stop, a very quick, efficient one indeed, but that puts Porsche number 4 into the lead. That's Peter Fitzgerald from John Smith in Porsche number 5 in second place. In third place is car number 18, that's the Lotus of Larry Perkins. In fourth place behind it is car number 7, that's the Mazda of Gary Walden, but it's now scheduled for a stop, of course. Then it's the Holden Commodore V8, the SS car, that's in fifth place. That's car 43 of Richard Wilson, Troy Nicholson. And in sixth place is car number 21, Gary Rogers, in the Subaru RS Turbo that's been very quiet but efficient so far.
We've been under the instructions of the pace car for quite a few laps after Jane Taylor lost the Citroen right up on the top of Forest Elbow and rolled it down the elbow quite a good way. So the pace car was out for a while. They've in fact only just started racing again, and our lead car is still the Porsche one of the Porsches, driven by Fitzgerald Peters and Nicholas Luttweiler in the car at the moment, followed by the Mazda, 2 Mazdas, and then the other Porsche. So we've got Porsche, Mazda, Mazda, Porsche, then the Honda NSX with Wayne Gardner, I think, still in the car, followed by the Skyline, and then on down the field. Will Hagen, it's been an eventful couple of hours.
It's a very eventful moment at this stage because both the Lotus there, but also the Porsche, I think, has a problem, and we've seen the Mazda go into the lead, but this was the problem with this exotic Lotus on pole position. Never really got going, better than third place, and had problems, fell to 37th place, is now 23rd, and that's Tom Watkinson from the Corolla. Okay, but the car out.
We have a new leader for the time being. Mind you, it seesaws a good deal in this 12 hours. There it is, the Jones and Walden Mazda RX7. And it's leading the Porsche at the moment. So we've got Mazda, Porsche, and then...
the winning Mazda had made a quick pit stop to refit a hose only 4 laps into the race. It dropped to 12th place, yet 11 laps later, it was 5th behind its teammate, the 2 Porsches and the Lotus Esprit. 34 laps later, by lap 49, it was back in the lead.
Managed to make a pit stop during that pace car period, which was 25 minutes, which was quite a long time. Very appropriately used, though, because it was a dangerous situation and a lot of dirt and stuff on the track. But this is now an opportunity for Mazda to crack back at Porsche to put on some pressure on Nicholas Luttweiler in car 4, who's fallen to second.
But there is our lead car, the Mazda RX7 at this point in time. We have it Mazda, we have it Porsche, Mazda, Porsche, and then the Honda. Well, this really is interesting racing. We've had a lot happen. That Lotus has been in trouble all the way through.
In just half an hour since the pace car went away, Gary Walden's Mazda has sprinted to an advantage of 40 seconds over the Porsche of Peter Fitzgerald and Nicholas Luttweiler. The race is turning very much into a tortoise and hare affair. These Mazdas are lapping at 2 minutes 34 seconds and going even faster. So that's 2 seconds under last year's lap record. This pit stop, sensationally quick for Walden, 26 seconds.
Well, Gary Walden is ripping around the track at the moment, and his co-driver's sitting right next to me. Alan Jones, g'day.
Hey, Tim.
Climbing all over the Porsches, John Smale said.
Yeah, well, we have to. I mean, we're lapping sort of 35s relatively comfortably. We're not stretching the cars. We're not revving them as much as we could be. But we feel we probably have to do that to make up for the extra pit stop.
No problems?
No, so far, touch wood.
Yeah, long way to go yet, though.
It certainly is, yeah. I mean, I keep looking at the clock and it feels like about midday and it's only about 10 o'clock.
It seems to me like all the guys out there are having a tremendous time. I've seen a couple of great little dices. Is that what you do out there? Just have a little dice every minute just to keep the interest up?
Well, no. I mean, here's my co-driver now, Gary Walden, who's doing a fabulous job. I mean, he's just so clean and smooth and he's lapping very, very consistently and very fast. Yeah. The major problem with us is that a lot of the guys are having a lot of dices, and you come across a 4 or 6 car dice.
You come up behind.
Yeah, and you can't just sort of double guess and go through because, you know, like one rival is concentrating on passing the guy that's in front of him and he hasn't seen you and he could come over and hit you. So you really have to stay back and wait your turn and pick the gaps when they become available.
In a race this long, is concentration a problem?
Yes and no, but as I said before, the 3 or 4 cars having their own little race helps the concentration. You know, you really got to concentrate all the time, and, you know, I'm talking to the guy in the pits and watching the revs and the temperatures, and you know, we're pushing the cars relatively hard, although we've got a bit up our sleeve for later on if we need to.
All right, have a good time when you get back in the car.
Thanks, Tim.
Just stay there for a second. There is your car number 7, the Mazda RX7, and doing it great. Look at Gary Walden using all that roadway. He's having a fabulous time.
Horses are rare at motor races, perhaps because of the insult of being usurped by the motor car early this century. And this wanderer was especially unwelcome. It was nearly disastrous for Mazda's meticulous race plan. Team manager Alan Horsley knew the Porsches were due for a long pit stop to change brakes. Suddenly, there was now a time-saving moment to do it, although he quickly swung his lead car in for attention as well. But the expected time gain, perhaps as much as a lap, was lost. All that was left then was to wait for the lovely MX-6 pace car to pull off and then to start racing harder and faster again.
And the order is car number 1, the Mazda, in the lead, but still 4 cars on the lead lap, and 2 of those took advantage of the pace car period, Porsche number 4 and Mazda number 7, as the car pulls away to go in and make pit stops at minimal expense in time. And those cars in second and third place are now out on the track again together. So there'll be a real race on, and here they are. That is second place, and car 7 is third place in the motor race. 126 laps completed, 27 as they go across the start-finish line, and the Mazda goes for a sprint. Boxes the Porsche in a little bit, but the Porsche, I think, was content to be boxed in. Not in a hurry, and as Peter Fitzgerald and Nicholas Leutwiler have said, they're doing their own thing.
Overall, the 2 RX7s in the lead now, 1 and 2, then the 2 Porsches, then the Honda NSX. The 2 Mazdas and the 2 Porsches are having a battle royal out there on the mountain, and a good 5 or 6 laps behind them now is the Honda NSX, and then that's followed by the GTR Skyline, first of the Falcons, and a couple of MR2s. And there is car number 7, our race leader, as we join our commentators. Craig Denyer, g'day to you, and Kenny Douglas, how are you?
Good afternoon, Tim Webster. Well, 27 different makes or models of cars made up the field that started this morning. 8 different makes qualified in the top 10. 54 cars started the race, which this year, of course, is a real shootout between the supercars. The Mazda RX-7, the Porsche 968, the Honda NSX, the Lotus Esprit Turbo, and the Nissan Skyline GTR. $950,000 worth of motor cars sat on the first 4 rows of the grid alone this morning. Ken Douglas, that's not a bad price tag, is it?
It's pretty amazing. Of course, there's a limited number of people that can afford that, but I've got to say, when you see the car sitting there, you get a really warm feeling.
Car 1 is on the screen at the moment, which is the beautiful Mazda RX-7, now sponsored by BP Visco. This is the Greg Hansford, Charlie O'Brien car, running second in the race, second to the Gary Walden car, and Alan Jones, who of course is doing the driving stint for that car at the moment. The Mazda RX-7 can are a fantastic little motor car. Some of their specifications include what?
Oh, it's a 76-litre fuel tank in it, which is good for this sort of car. Of course, it runs with a Wankel rotary engine, a 13B engine, and that makes it unique in this particular race. Twin turbochargers as well, and electronic fuel injection.
This is the situation with the race lead in this fascinating race. 1,080 kilometres covered. So now 12 laps more, 80 kilometres more than the Tui's 1,000 in October, and they've just swapped the race lead, with car 7 going off into the lead now. The Gary Walden Alan Jones Mazda RX-7 ahead of car number 1, the Charlie O'Brien Greg Hansford car. And as I say, the race just continues to vacillate. Tremendous contest, and John Bowe, what are they doing, do you reckon?
Well, as Alan Jones likes to say, I think he's got his eyes on. He came out of the pits behind the number 1 car, and he's really charging. He knows that he has to make another stop to get some brake pads, which costs 90 seconds or so. And he'd be as fast as he could go at the moment, and doing a tremendous job.
It's the sort of instruction a race driver loves. It's what you got last year, wasn't it, when you had problems?
I suppose if a guy has to be replaced by a world champion's not so bad.
You don't feel as though you've lost your job to a shock?
No, not really. No, he's a great driver. Anyone that wins a world championship's got to be a great driver.
John, how well can these 2 cars take a thrashing in terms of brakes, in terms of engine temperature and so on?
Well, they're really doing well at the moment. Last year when we had the problems, after Alan Horsley, the team manager, said go for it, I drove it flat out, and it didn't miss a beat. They've now got better brake pads that they can get 4 hours out of. So, you know, I think the car's pretty strong, but those Porsches are lurking, and I wouldn't like to have money on anything at the moment.
Also lurking across the studio is Peter Fitzgerald and Greg Hansford, watching respectively the performances of the various cars. Tim Webster, are you keeping them apart?
I am. I thought I'd organise a bit of World Championship car bluing here. What do you think?
Fair enough.
Here they are. I tell you what, Greg Hansford had his eyes glued to the set. It's a great stoush going on out there, boys.
Yeah, well, I just hope it continues for everybody's sake. It'd be nice to have a really close race to the end.
Yeah, cars are going well for both of you.
Yes, actually, I would have liked to have been sitting back having a bit of a relaxation time at the moment, but we've given instructions to our drivers to pick the pace up a bit. We had a problem with car 4 in that we're only getting part throttle in the last stint, and a 4-pound hammer fixed that.
Incidentally, we might try and have a chat to the car. You want to have a chat to the car? Try it and see what happens.
Sure.
Talk to your driver.
Sure. Have you picked the pace up?
I can hardly understand you. It's pretty noisy with you.
He says, have you picked the pace up? He wants you to go another 2 seconds a lap faster.
Okay.
Rev it to 11,000.
And Greg, for you, I guess it's a matter of just staying out in front of them. They'll let them catch you.
Yeah, well, we've got to get a little bit further in front because we've got one more brake pad change to do, which is, as John said before, again, 80 seconds. We've been doing 22-second fuel and driver changes, so that's quite good in and out, but the brakes are the worry.
There's been plenty of changes of lead in the James Hardy 12 hour, just over 2/3 race distance. 8 hours and 20 minutes racing. This is the one, though, leading at this stage. Car number 7, one of the winning drivers from last year, Gary Walden. Alan Jones drafted into the team to take the place of John Bowe with his conflicting oil company interests. So, great combination, and Alan Jones giving it some real hurry up at the moment. And being told to do that when you're a driver like Alan Jones is a real joy. That's the gap between first and second place. An amazing motor race, this one, really seesawing and open to enormous potential. And in car 1, of course, Charlie O'Brien, Greg Hansford, and backed up if necessary by Terry Lewis. So this is the outright position at this stage in the James Hardy 12 hour at Mount Panorama. The Mazdas, then the 2 Porsches, the Honda NSX soldiering on but with problems, the Nissan GTR close enough to threaten fairly soon. Tremendous job by the XR6, and then look at those amazing little 2-litre MR2s in the sports car category.
Welcome back with pictures of the probably hardest workers on the mountain. These are the pit crews, and they pretty much have competitions between themselves to see how fast they can do all of this. Fuel up, change tyres, change brakes, do whatever's necessary to get that car back on the road and up the mountain fast as is humanly possible. And gee, they go. I watched them out the window here, and it's a fantastic thing to watch. They go like the clappers.
8 3/4 hours into the James Hardy 12 hour, and we look behind us and just see the smoking hulk of the Lotus Esprit, regrettably going up the pit lane to be retired to the back of the garages. Larry Perkins, a disappointing day for you. What's put the car out?
Well, there's some form of engine problem. It's got tremendous blow-by, and I don't know the reasons, but it couldn't act the pace at this stage for some reason.
Larry, you can't bring a car to Bathurst first time and win, can you?
Well, it's very rarely done, that's for sure. And you know, we had early problems that weren't the problems of the car though, and it was going very fine, and we had no trouble to keep up the pace or indeed make the pace. And we had some brake problems, but that was through lack of experience in the outfit. And what's happened now, I don't know till they analyse it. It may, obviously it shouldn't have happened, but whether that could have been avoided, I don't know.
More runs for the Lotus in production car racing in Australia?
I don't know whether there'll be more races. I've just done a one-off deal, and I don't know what the owner of the car is going to do, but it certainly created some interest. It's a very quick car, and it'd be nice to see it out there again somewhere.
I think the post-mortem tonight will be very interesting.
Yes, I think so too.
This pit stop should take about 1:15. The chances are it's going to be less than that as the tyres go on, while Mazda trying to get every second they can out of this pit stop, because it's going to be so critical for them in only 2 and 3 hours time when the Porsches really start to challenge. It's gone in 1:13 seconds, and Gary Walden now holds the fate of the Mazda team in his hands.
The pit work has been really sensational in that Mazda team. It's been astonishing. If they were full-blooded professionals like they have in America, you'd be impressed, but for them to be apprentices, you can't believe it. But this is the car that Ken Douglas now leads.
I think the number 4 Porsche on screen at the moment has just passed it.
Fired up, and he desperately wants to win this race, so and he's got all the ingredients to do so.
Well, for further information on this Mazda Porsche battle, John Smales.
And John Bowe, Alan Jones has been doing the weight loss program today on your behalf. Jonesy,
good on him.
Have you given the car to him to Gary Walden in good condition?
Oh, brand new. He couldn't wish for a better one. Brakes are a little bit spongy, but we've just changed them, so they should be great. But apart from that, the car's running perfectly. Bowie, you should be in it.
Thanks for doing it for me, AJ.
Alan, tell me, is it the decision right to put Walden in for 3 hours non-stop now?
Well, I think I said we can't afford the changes. I just did 3 hours, I think, and then he's doing 3 hours. We just can't afford to give anything away to the Porsches.
How close is it going to be at the finish, do you reckon?
Bloody close, I think.
Alan Jones with his tip on the race.
And there's the Mazda RX7, still looking as cool and unfussed as ever as it streams around the circuit here at Mount Panorama. We've got them all still up the... In fact, we've got both the Mazdas in the lead again now, but one of the Porsches has just been in the pits as I take you back to Bill Hagan.
John Bowe, that Mazda's being worked pretty hard.
He's doing a great job. He really is a tremendous driver, and I think they are looking pretty good at the moment. You know, they've got 2 stops to make, but they're only fuel stops, and they've been refueling in about 20 seconds. He's got a 65 second gap over the Porsche, which has to make 1 stop. So, you know, I think if you can ever be confident, now's probably the time.
But pit stops to come, and always there's a risk with them.
There always is, but particularly if you've got a brake change or something, lots of things can go wrong. But refueling is pretty straightforward, and the Mazda guys haven't missed a beat all day. They've been tremendous in the pits, and you know, Gary is just doing a great job. The car is the same car that won the race last year, and it's done the tour of the dealers all around the countryside, so it's far from new, and it's just testimony to the quality of the motor car.
In Gary Walden and Charlie O'Brien winning that race last year, they averaged 131.1 kilometres an hour. It was a lift of 6 kilometres an hour of the previous year. We've now averaged 134.7 kilometres an hour to this point, to 9.5 hours. So they've lifted it by another 3.6 kilometres an hour, John, as an average. It's a pretty fair increase.
Well, the car last year was virtually straight off the boat. They had minimum time to develop it.
Well, Smithy's trying everything he can now to catch up to the leading Mazdas. He has to work it like that and the car will get sideways.
John Bow, it was admitted by Alan Horsley and some of the drivers last year that you're probably too conservative in the pace that you ran with the Mazdas. Do you think that's been the case again this year on either team's behalf, Mazda or Porsche?
Well, I don't know what the strategy was for the Porsches, but I know the Mazdas haven't been conserved because of the fact that they have to make more fuel stops. They had to set a cracking pace, and they weren't given an easy time from the word go. And the fact that they're still out there and still very healthy, as I said, is testimony to the car.
In fact, at the moment, just took time, and it would appear that Peter Fitzgerald is actually catching Gary Walden a little bit. Peter's in 3rd place at the moment. The Mazda #1 is in 2nd place, but is expected into the pits in the next couple of laps, so that will elevate Fitzy to 2nd.
Rather interesting, and interesting to look at that MR2 there, Ken Douglas. It's a slightly scarred one. Let's see what happened. And Juan Fangio there, and car number 2.
You've got to be kidding.
And an innocent.
Poor old Fangio, one would hit him.
And down in the pits, this is critical.
Is critical, Will Hagan. Greg Hansford about to get into the Mazda car 1, currently lying 2nd, 1 minute and 14 seconds behind its teammate, the Gary Walden car, but now relinquishing 2nd place, of course, to the Porsche, and maybe 3rd place as well. Hansford in the car and goes in 19.68 seconds. Now, there's at least one more stop for that car, but when you look at your watch and work it out, John Bow, I think they're going to have 2 more stops before they get that car to the finish at 4:45.
I think that's right, John. Yeah, the #1 car has got 2 more stops to go. But what a sensational pit stop with the driver change, 19 seconds. That's the quickest I've seen all day. And they're both pretty big guys, Greg and Charlie, so they must have become a bit more supple in their old age. or it's the threat of Alan Horsley standing next to them.
Yes, horizontal Horsley. Poor Alan had back troubles at the Sandown race, spent the entire Sunday of the race 2 months ago on his back, and has been in bed for about a month ever since. So that the cars are going like this is remarkable when you throw in the fact that the team manager has been out of active involvement in their preparation for nearly 4 weeks.
Well, it's a credit to Barry Jones, who's obviously a Mazda expert, has been for many years, but he's responsible for the preparation of the cars, and he does a tremendous job. He didn't have hardly any time last year, and they won the race, and this year he's really refined the car in the areas that you're allowed to do so.
I saw the thoroughness they go into. I saw that driver list, a list of instructions. You know, you get world champion like Alan Jones, or top guns like Gary Walden, Greg Hansford and so on, and a 13-item instruction sheet as to what they were and were not to do. What were the critical areas, John Bell?
Oh, because I'm not a driver now, that they didn't actually show it to me, but I think, speaking to Alan Jones, he appreciates the professionalism of that sort of thing. I mean, what Alan does best is drive the car, and he doesn't want to worry about anything but driving. So it's good that someone else takes care of all those other small items.
There were some of the things you were talking about, and that is easing off the throttle instead of jumping off the throttle, so you don't dislodge turbocharger inlet hoses and so on, but also to be gentle with the gear shifts. I'm trying to think what some of the others were. As I say, there were 13 items. Oh, it was an instruction on rev limits.
Yeah, well, at Sandown we only had about 9 or 10 items, so they've thought up a few more for us. But it's good. I mean, it's very professional. All you do is get in the car and follow instructions, you know.
And
that's how
look
it
at this situation, Ken Douglas.
Yes, John Smith's in the car. He's been doing a few laps now, so the tyres are warm. John's in the groove. The Mazda driver, which I think at the moment... Greg Hansford. He's got to get used to the feel of the car again with a full tank of fuel. They didn't change tyres, so they're nice and warm, but obviously the balance of the car has changed. Smithy's got his dander up, so he's going to be chasing as hard as he can. Absolutely. But when you've been out of the car for 3 hours and you've had a cup of coffee and a bit of a rest, it takes a few laps just to get yourself cranked right up to speed again, and John Smith's obviously taking advantage of that.
Look at this dice, and I think you'll find in just a second the Porsche will take over the Mazda. Car number 5 will take on car number 1 on the inside, and this is the dice that's going on in the mountain as we speak. And is it ever tight? Look at this.
There's a battle royal raging in the outright class. There's 4 cars all on the same lap, and we're going to leave you. Thank you for your time. As we have a look at car number 7, and this is the leading Mazda, and Ken Douglas, what's happening?
And keeping a stopwatch on Peter Fitzgerald and Gary Walden for the last few laps. Fitzy seems to be catching, well, he is catching Gary about 1 to 2 seconds per lap. Now, that's going to make it that's about the rate he needs to catch him to be able to win at the end.
So, John Bowe, you're nodding. What's that mean?
Well, I don't know whether it means anything. Well, you know, it could mean that Gary struck a bad run of traffic, or it could mean that he's got a slight problem. I don't know. Maybe we'll get some lap times on what he's doing, and then I'll know how hard he's trying. But he looks like he's trying pretty hard.
I'll say he looks as though he's trying.
I don't think he'd want much more than that. Actually, I think Gary's been pretty sensible the way he's driving the car. He's working it very hard in the corners, but he seems to be being very gentle on the brakes, making up the speed where it doesn't hurt the car and saving it where it does.
Lovely flow, John Bowe.
He has, yeah.
Lovely flow and rhythm.
I cannot speak highly enough of him. He's an excellent driver.
And it's in the pits. This is the critical stop. 1 minute and 16 seconds separates it and the Porsche. This is going to be a splash and dash only. They're trying to get as much fuel into the car as possible. They say it's got to be as quick as it possibly can, because only 1 minute and 17 seconds separates them. The Porsche needs only one more stop. After this stop, the Mazda needs only one more stop. Let's see what happens. 21 seconds. The Mazda's not through. The Porsche's not through, and the Mazda goes back into the lead.
So there was no inheritance there for Porsche as the Mazda weaves its way out of pit lane. Have a look at the Porsche stalking it on Conrod. The lead of car number 7 as he crests the mountain at Reed Park. Swoops off the top there, all light on the left front, and then runs it through, and you saw where the second place car, Porsche number 4, was. So John Bowe?
Well, it's the same old scenario. It's if the Mazda is healthy, Gary certainly can do the job. I really doubt that the Porsche can catch it, but it's still a long way to go. It's a bit premature to make those sort of predictions, I think. But it's looking good, and everybody's flat out. Nobody's conserving anything now. There's no point.
Well, this is the situation in the race overall, with 1 hour and 55 minutes remaining in what is an absolute beauty, and nobody yet knows the answer. That's
Will Hagan working very hard in the last hour and a half of this telecast, and here comes the Mazda.
We'll all know it. We've done 12 hours when it's over, Tim, won't we? Poor old Tim's collapsing too. I found you trying to recover some strength on the floor over there a little while ago. But car number 7's leading the motor race, and it's probably in better condition than we are. It's going gangbusters at the moment, and Gary Walden doing the job for this massive 3-hour stint in car number 7, not able to afford the luxury of even a driver change. the man who had cramp at his leg earlier. He's had some massage in the pits and no doubt some tablets to try and stop that recurring. But Ken Douglas, the gap back to the Porsche number 4 that threatens.
Gary's been able to stabilise it at the moment. It seems to be hovering around the low 50-second mark. Fitzy made a bit of a charge for a while. Gary's been able to hold it. John Smith seems to be sitting around 80 seconds behind, and Greg Hansford about an extra 15 seconds behind that. So still the first 4 cars on the lead lap, but Gary Walden seems to be consolidating the situation.
And pit stop situations to come.
One more stop for each of the Mazdas and one more stop for each of the Porsche. There is a bit of a question mark over the number 7 car in that it may need a splash of fuel at the end. I'm not sure.
Which one's that?
The number 7, the leading car.
This is the car they're all chasing, including the 2 Porsches and the other Mazda. It's the one they really want to get hold of. Car number 7 with Gary Walden at the wheel, the car that he shared with Alan Jones.
Car 1 of Greg Hansford, and according to the Mazda team, Greg Hansford is exhausted in the motor car as the Falcon Tyres number 3 Nissan comes in. Hansford for a splash of fuel only and goes out in 13.3 seconds, still in 4th place, and seems quite secure to hold that position to the end.
Wasn't far off the tail end of the Nissan Skyline GTR either as he blasted out. Now with 28 minutes and 45 seconds remaining. And that little stop, John Bow, and that little refresher and the extra adrenaline from it, is that enough for a reviver?
I don't think he'd be physically exhausted, Will. He's probably just mentally exhausted. The car's got power steering and it's not a heavy car to drive, it's quite light, but the concentration required in a race this long is really difficult, and you've got to keep at it all the time.
So the 2 Mazdas in close company there. Car 7 that's leading the race, car 1 that sandwiches the 2 Porsches because it's in 4th place, and 252 laps completed by car 7 and 251 by the other cars at the moment, which indicates that car 7 has this much of a lead. The others haven't yet crossed the finishing line. And that, of course, includes the car that's very nearly having a lap put on it by its teammate.
There is the race leader, car number 7, the Mazda RX7, being driven by Gary Walden and Alan Jones. John Bow, this could be the car that gives Alan Jones his first ever Bathurst win.
Well, I certainly hope so. I know Alan's been coming here for a long time now, and I know he told me that his son Christian always says, why don't you win Bathurst, Dad? So I think this is his big chance, and he's done a great job, as has Gary Walden and the whole Mazda operation. It's a tremendous effort against all odds, I feel, because I think the Porsche had the advantage in the braking area.
You were talking about Gary Walden earlier as being one of the most underrated drivers. He certainly is very, very fast, does most of the development work on the Mazda RX7s, I believe, along with yourself.
Well, no, I don't do any work on them, but he works very closely with Barry Jones, and he does a lot of testing, and every time Gary's told me the car's better, it's been better, and he's just one of those guys, I think, that's over the years has been overlooked, and he's a terrific driver. He's just very smooth, easy on the car, and super quick at the same time, so he doesn't give you an impression of going fast, but he is. He's sort of, I can liken it to Alain Prost in a different sort of area, I guess, because Prost never ever looks like he's trying to me, and he's always going faster than everyone else.
He's been racing Mazdas a long, long time, and in actual fact started racing in a Triumph TR7 in a car that he won. Car 5 is currently on your screen. The Porsche 968 currently running second outright, driven by John Smith, and of course Kevin Waldock from the Gold Coast.
In a very, very hard-run race, we've seen Mazda, perhaps just work a little bit harder at it, perhaps just have a little bit more race experience run their way.
Well, I thought before the race started that it would take an incredible team effort by the Mazda boys to get the victory from Porsche, but that's what they've provided. Everybody in the team has given 110%, and you know, it's paid off, and they're a much sharper operation, much better car than last year. That's why they've travelled so much further than last year.
Charlie O'Brien, part of the winning combination with Gary Walden last year, paired with Greg Hansford this year, and in 4th place at this stage, and coming round to complete his 255th lap, as the 3 cars in front of him have already and also done.
Well, that's Greg actually in the car. He's in his 3rd hour, which is why he would be feeling the pinch a bit mentally, because the concentration, as I said before, is very hard work, particularly when there's a big speed differential between the cars.
And his margin has gone out to 10 laps over this dog-bone Honda. And if ever there was a dogged, determined effort, it was this one, starting off with the way Wayne Gardner tried to qualify it, perhaps even before that, when Ross Palmer of Palmer Tube Mills, an owner of an enormous international business turning over more than $200 million a year, decided to buy the car and go racing, something that nobody else had really done in this sort of racing with that car. And then he got hold of one of the best handlers in the business, Wayne Gardner, and then Wayne Gardner got hold of the car, and earlier this week, in throwing it around Mount Panorama and trying desperately to steal pole position from cars that probably were better equipped to have pole position, he very nearly pulled it off, but instead of that, he inflicted an enormous amount of damage on the $167,000 motor car. But then the dogged effort continued with those TAFE students. And what a sensational, dedicated job they did. There were guys there that didn't sleep for 2 nights. There surely can't be a driver out there who isn't exhausted at this stage, who isn't wishing for this race to stop. But in fact, there's another 12.5 minutes remaining. Tortuous minutes. Minutes that can be so difficult, because one lapse of concentration could bring a massive effort to a grinding halt. There's 4th place Mazda number 1 in the hands of Charlie O'Brien and Greg Hansford. Greg Hansford in the car at the moment. And the 1st place car, the car leading the race, that's trying to make back-to-back victories with Walden driving, Gary Walden, the car that he shared with Alan Jones. And looking to me, John Bow, almost, no, they're letting the 7 car press on, but almost as though Alan Horsley would love to see them in formation finish across the finishing line.
I'm sure he would, Will, but I don't think he'd want to tempt fate like that when there's still nearly 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's a few laps too. It could be 3 or 4 laps yet. But over there with Tim Webster are 2 very, very nervous co-drivers. Charlie O'Brien, who won here last year, and whose car is lying 4th at this stage, and Kevin Waldock, whose car is lying in 2nd place. How do you gentlemen feel at this stage?
Yeah, Charlie, how are you feeling?
Well, not quite as nervous as last year. A few minutes ago, everyone's saying, "Oh, we won the race." No, we haven't won the race until the checkered flag drops.
That's right.
You can't discount anything in motor racing. If it's going to happen, it can happen on the last lap.
Yeah, Kevin, your car's made up a bit of time, but it's still, I think, about 45, 46 seconds behind. Bit tough.
It'll be very hard to make up that time unless something happens to the Mazdas now. But we're racing our 2nd car, which was Peter Fitzgerald, who into 3rd. We're actually holding about 12 seconds on him.
Mate, you wouldn't wish anything to happen to the Mazda, surely? You're a more charitable fellow than that?
Actually,
he's such a nice guy.
Actually, I'm philosophical about motor racing. We were in Sandowner at the 500 there, and we were on the 2nd last lap, coming 3rd very comfortably, and we broke a bolt and didn't finish, so anything can happen.
Well, we've mentioned this throughout the day, but are you guys both surprised that we've got 4 cars this close after 12 hours nearly?
I think so, yeah. It's amazing that separated by just minutes after 12 hours. Just goes to show how reliable these cars are.
All right, let's see if we can grab a chat to Peter Fitzgerald. Peter, have you got us? I've got Kevin Waldock with me. Peter Fitzgerald, can you hear us in the car?
I've got a lot of interference.
How's it going, mate? We're all sitting here keeping an eye on you.
I don't think he's picking us up too well.
I really can't understand you.
No, it's okay, Pete. You stick to the task. I've got you.
Peter, could you actually slow down a little bit?
That was Charlie O'Brien, Peter.
He's trying to distract me, is he?
I think he might have been, yes. A little bit of gamesmanship, I think it's called. How you going, all right?
Yeah, mate, I'm a little disappointed, I suppose. I thought we'd take this out, but I think you've got to take the good with the bad. And you know, the cars have run well all day, and the crew, I've got to pay tribute to them. They've been every bit as good as the Mazda blokes. And the drivers as well. You know, the whole package has been good. I just think they had too much legs on us.
Yeah, the Mazdas are a fabulous car.
Yeah, they are indeed. Well, I don't know whether this cheers you up, but You're going faster than last year. It seems the cars are going faster. More laps are being done than previous years.
Look at this idiot, Jesus.
Oh, I see. You even talk like that when you're on the mountain like you do on the road. As we take a look at the leading car and its partner. And there's the two green Visco Mazdas. Will Hagen, they've got it, I think.
55 cars started the race last year, 39 finished. 53 started the race this year, and a higher proportion will finish. I'm not quite sure of the number that are on the list here are still running, but I'm pretty sure it's higher than the 39 last year. And heading them all in a tremendous organisational effort, because I see that as being the essence of this win for Mazda. It's been one that's had to take planning and so on. It was not a matter of taking a car and throwing some drivers and turning up at the track. It took an enormous amount of race planning and strategy and thinking and meetings with drivers and rehearsing pit crews and so on by Alan Horsley, who'd worked years ago with Alan Moffat with his race team with the RX7 Mazda. And as I say, all of that, every bit of that was necessary for this victory to be put in place at the end of what has been an enthralling, hard-fought, give-away nothing 12 hours. John Bower, is that overstating the case?
No, that's absolutely spot on, Will. It's a magnificent effort by everybody in the team. You just couldn't speak highly enough of all of them, and they all work so well together. There's no bitching and no backbiting. It really is a good effort, and I take my hat off to them.
But you know, sometimes you've got to just literally turn up with the machinery, and the machinery's good enough if you've got a good enough driver to drive it and to win. And that was not the case here, was it?
Well, I think the car...
It had to be engineered. I mean, the car was
good enough to win, of course, but it wasn't that easy. It wasn't like last year when the Mazda had a 5 or 6 second gap on the second fastest car in the race. In this race, the Mazda actually wasn't the fastest car on the circuit, and it's taken a lot of slick pit work, very good efforts by the drivers, and a lot of very good strategy from Alan Horsley and Barry Jones.
And coming up onto the Subaru Turbo, the RS of Gary Rogers, that's currently lying in 37th place. It qualified very well.
Had a gearbox change about an hour ago.
Yeah, qualified in 9th place. One of 8 different cars in the top 10 in qualifying.
The gap from first to second is now down to 41.6 seconds, so John Smith obviously is still trying, but I think Gary Walton's obviously still trying as well. But this will be the last lap, or last lap but one, and Gary's just getting it round to the finish. I think I can see a formation finish coming up here, actually.
I think so, Ken. I must mention here that the Dunlop tyres on the Mazdas, they are so good that they were recycling them. They were taking them off and putting them back on the next car when they stopped, because they were just showing negligible wear. So it's a great effort by Dunlop as well.
The computer, incidentally, is showing, and this should be the last lap, is showing that the Class A leaders swapped to the advantage of Toyota Corolla number 34 ahead of the Suzuki Swift, Mark Brayman Draper, and car number 56. But this is the run to the finishing line, surely. About another 5.5 kilometres remaining. 262 laps completed so far, to compare with last year's 254. So we believe it is the last lap. So this climb up the mountain is the last time uphill for these guys, except for the roller coaster of Conrod Straight. 263 laps should be the race winning distance at 1,634 kilometres, and that works out to an average speed as they cross the finishing line of 136 kilometres an hour. Last year they averaged 131.1 kilometres an hour. They've raised the average by 5 kilometres an hour for every hour of the race. And over there with Tim Webster, how's the Mazda team?
Well, Charlie O'Brien's looking pretty intent on watching the screen, but I think he's a pretty happy man for the Mazda team. A winner last year and coming fourth this year. I mean, it's pretty credible performance, Charlie.
It is, Tim. The whole thing is a team effort, and for Mazda to win again this year, I think it's a great effort for Alan Horsley to put it all together. So I'm very happy for him. Obviously, it would be nice to be a little further up in front of the Porsches, but well, there's next year, so we'll be back.
All right, well, here they come.
And I think part of the success was a chef over there looking after the team called Nick Ott, and that's what these cars ultimately did, or Car 7. And he did a tremendous job and kept everybody really happy. But Car 7 heading to the finishing line now to complete 263 laps, 1,600 odd kilometres around Mountain Panorama Bathurst to take a second glorious victory in this third James Hardy 12-hour for series production cars. And it is a great effort indeed. The drivers, Gary Walden and Alan Jones, John Bowe in the commentary box instead of being in there in the car. But a tremendous effort and well backed up into fourth place by car 1, Charlie O'Brien, Greg Hansford, and the second placed car now coming towards the finishing line, the Porsche 968 CS. Victorious at Sandown, or the other car was number 4, but car 5 across the finishing line to take second place. And that for John Smith, Kevin Waldock and Jeff Morgan. And there's Alan Horsley and Barry Jones and the guys that really did it for Mazda. And Ian Campbell with them.
Alan Horsley, a heads-up challenge with Porsche today, and it's a BP Mazda team that's come out on top.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I really don't. I didn't think those cars would stand up to that punishment all day.
And everything go to plan? Are you happy with this?
Yeah, we're happy. We're happy, but yeah, it went pretty well to plan, except for that early stop and the horse walking on the track. But apart from that, everything went to plan.
This was a marvellous motor race. After 12 hours, the BP Visco Team RX7 crossed the line just 34 seconds ahead of the German Porsche. Its teammate was nearly a minute in arrears, with the second Mazda fourth. Yet the winning drivers, Market Gardner and occasional racer Gary Walden, and the 1980 World Driving Champion Alan Jones, had to fight furiously for victory. There were 17 lead changes between the 4 Mazdas and Porsches. The winning Mazda took the lead 7 times. Its teammate took it 6 times. This year's winning distance was a massive 9 laps, 60 kilometres further than last year. That's an increase of nearly 5 kilometres an hour average speed. It beat its own lap record by a massive 3.2 seconds and broke it 45 times. Indeed, only 5 cars in the field of 53 could manage even 1 lap faster than the Mazda's winning average lap time, including its 11 pit stops. But the final official result was even more satisfying for the BP Mazda Motorsport team. The locally made wheels on the Porsches gave them greater offset than specified by the factory. The $130,000 contenders were disqualified. Team manager Horsley didn't want to push the RX7 so hard, for he didn't know whether the cars would last. But it was the speed needed to beat the hottest field in the 3-year and growing history of this fascinating race. And, like last year, Mazda was in it to win, to show the public what its cars could do under the most extreme conditions, at the top end of their performance potential. This race for production cars proves road-going cars for road users. It's a showroom Grand Prix, a comparison of cars available to the public as they're sold for the road from the showroom. So once again, it was the Mazdas with just 2 cylinders at each of their diminutive rotary engines, a design similar to the Le Mans 24 Hours winner of just 2 years earlier that finished first and second, victories back to back. Mazda, production car conquerors of the best from Europe and Japan.
It takes a special performance to beat Mazda's rotary win at Le Mans. And last year's heart-stopping victory at Bathurst. It takes a repeat performance. Mazda. RX7 Mazda.